Hi everyone, this is Sean. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be discussing my transition from being a security officer all the way to becoming a police officer. This is just my perspective, my opinion, my thoughts. You talk to somebody else, you're going to have a totally different perspective. Maybe, or something similar. I will be discussing this transition in a more negative light today, but in future videos, I will be discussing the transfer in a more positive light. I need to make about 15 of these videos, so let's get the negative issues out of the way, and I will be discussing 3 negative issues from my transfer. Number 1, you are operating in a paramilitary environment. It's not military, it's paramilitary, and you're groomed at the Basic Police Academy. At the Basic Police Academy, your drill instructors, a lot of them are former military. Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Army, you name it. Okay, these are your drill instructors. And their job is to trim the academy class. So if you have 100, their job is to weed out the weak, those who are not cut for law enforcement, and they do a great job at doing that. Everything is strict, everything is timed. I remember that when we had to PT, that's physical training, to get to a Class B uniform to a Class C, which was your PT uniform, you'd have 1 minute to change out. 1 minute. And the timer doesn't start off as 60 seconds, 59 seconds, 57, 56, 55. It starts off like this. Begin. 60, 59, 53, 52, 51, 40, 30, 31, 32. Obviously, nobody makes the time, so you do that all over again. So you're doing an extra PT. You're running inside the locker room just to change out back into your Class B. You're running out onto the asphalt in your push-up position, waiting for everybody to get back, and nobody makes the time, so you keep doing this over and over again until 30 minutes has passed. When you're finished with PT, after your 1 or 2 hour session, you come back and it's shower time. You get 3 minutes to change out from PT gear, run in the showers, come out and be in a Class A uniform. That's shirt and tie, everything shined up. 3 minutes. And nobody makes that time. There's females in the class, but sometimes they're faster than the male. Actually, in my class, the females were faster than the males. 3 minutes. So if one person lags, then you do it all over again. So we'd have to do this for a good 45 minutes. Welcome to a paramilitary structure. Lunchtime. Okay, your lunchtime is rushed. You don't want lunchtime. Lunchtime is the worst time. It's another PT time. So during lunch, I remember there was a circumstance where we had one guy, his wife brought him a Coca-Cola. Put it into his lunch bag. The drill instructors found that.
The fuck is that? What is that, Private Pile?
And he had to eat, or I'm sorry, he got to drink his Coca-Cola while everybody's in the front leaning rest position, push-ups. I kid you not, on the floor, eating their sandwich. Now this is cinnamon roll. This would be banned in the academy, but I think you guys get it. They're eating their sandwich in the push-up position. Not on the table, but the push-up position. Every time you go down, you take a bite. 1, down, 2. That's your lunchtime, guys. They are grooming you for what will appear in the real world. You have to be able to function under stress in a timely manner, and that's what I think that they're trying to accomplish. Also, once you're hired as a police officer, you are on training. That's a simple time for them to start hazing you. And I know hazing is illegal, but look, it happens in the academy. It happens at law enforcement agencies. Now, it just depends on the degree. So, for example, in the beginning, the way I was hazed was I left my locker unattended. Had my gun in the locker. Those of you who are former military or former law enforcement, you already know what happens. I came out of the shower and my weapon was in different pieces all over the locker room. And I'm not talking about just the barrel was out and the recoil spring was out and the magazine was out. You're talking about an armorer messing with your gun. Another circumstance, I got thrown into a jail cell to fight an inmate. That was not cool. That was not cool. How do they make this legal? How do you legitimize this? Well, the guy inside the cell was screaming, agitated, and he needed to be placed under control. So you're in there trying to de-escalate the situation, and then he attacks you. So that's how they get their fight. Now, back then, I thought it was something ridiculous. I thought that this was a form of hazing. The sergeant actually had to intervene and help. I lost. I'm going to admit on camera that I lost. But in all, I thought that was a positive learning experience. I mean, in the real world, you might not have backup, and you're on your own with somebody who's high on drugs. At my law enforcement job, do I think that this is acceptable? No. Do I do this to people who I train? No. It's a thing of the past. But other law enforcement agencies have a different hazing structure, which isn't allowed, but it happens. In a paramilitary structure, you also have to keep in mind that you answer to one supervisor and only one supervisor. So if you think that you want something done or you want to have a wish answered or a question answered by somebody who you think is in the best position to answer that question, you can't just skip ranks. You can't just go to a lieutenant, a captain, or a chief, or the sheriff, the undersheriff. You have to use the next person that's above you. That's a paramilitary rank structure. That's a command structure that you have to follow. I don't agree with that structure for many circumstances, but that's a paramilitary structure. And if you don't use that structure, that could be a form of insubordination if that initial supervisor told you not to go above them. Number 2, mandatory overtime. Now, in the beginning, I loved overtime. Guys, mind you, I'm going to be 42 soon. When I started at 21, I loved to work overtime. You make more money, you get to buy more cool stuff. But over the years, it has played a toll on me. I've missed so much of I want to say about 80% of my kids' sporting events. I missed their birthdays, their birthday parties. I've had to appear after work. These are times that you can never take back again. It's unfortunate, but it's a sacrifice, and it's a sacrifice that you have to be willing to make. You don't like to work weekends, you will work all weekends in the beginning, maybe even years later. Maybe seniority doesn't even matter. Holidays, Christmas time, Christmas Eve, you'll be working. You'll be working. Training, mandatory training. Even if you don't like the training, mandatory. I had to go to a week course on how to put in a car seat.
Boring.
How to put in a car seat and how to wear your seatbelt. 1 week, guys. Mandatory training. Court. Okay, court appearances. In the beginning, you're going to be making a lot of arrests because you're the new guy or new gal. With that comes court. A lot of defense attorneys know when you're brand new, and they're going to try to subpoena you on every single case. They think that they're going to win. You're going to get subpoenaed a lot. If you have vacation plans already set, well, if you have court, that's a legal summons for you to appear in court. Now, I've been in court where other officers haven't showed up, and the judge issued a bench warrant for their arrest. Some of these prosecutors, these district attorneys, they don't care if you have vacation, if you're going to leave the state, if you have plans, if you've spent $2,000-$3,000 on a vacation, they don't care. And that's a sacrifice that you have to be willing to make. Number 3, responsibilities. Most of the time, and I'm not saying always, because those of you who work hospital security, you do a lot of the duties that law enforcement performs. But generally, in law enforcement, you are dealing with other people's problems. Little Johnny doesn't want to go to school. Dispatch will send you to that address to encourage little Johnny to go to school. Obviously, depending on where you work. Little Sue wants to talk back to her mom. Little Sue, 16 years old. Send an officer over there. You can't make this stuff up. A tree falls onto the neighbor's house. Neighbor doesn't want to pay for it. They send you. Husband and wife get in an argument. They can't get along. You'll be there. And what you're going to do is you're going to fix 20 years of marriage. 20 years of marriage. You're going to fix in 10 minutes. A lot of social responsibility is pawned off to law enforcement. You are a social worker. You're a teacher. The only thing you can't be is the judge. You're the parent sometimes. There is so much more to do and so much more responsibility. And your beat is the entire city sometimes. Sometimes it's miles and miles of different properties. Somebody crashes their car. Take a report. Sometimes you won't take a report, depending on the agency that you work for. Let's talk about trespassers. As a private security officer, you might have arrested a trespasser. Police show up, you hand that person over to the police. Well, we all know that many trespassers are transients. There are a lot of transients that don't take showers. They are not hygienic. Okay, they have feces in their fingernails, feces all over their body, throw up, bodily fluids all over. They have, from using heroin too much, F's all over their arms and their legs. You have to deal with them as a police officer. So you're putting this person in handcuffs in your patrol car, and you're trying to book him into jail. You can't because this person is medically refused. So now you got to go to the hospital and get a medical clearance and wait there for 6 hours with Mr. and Mrs. Stinky. As a security officer, you're not stuck. You're not stuck with this person for all of these hours. And they're not usually in a confined space for all these hours. Depending on where you are, you would hand them over to the police. That's another significant difference. Active shooters. At a lot of private security companies, they have safety plans in case there's an active shooting situation. And part of the plan, almost every single time, is to dial 911. Well, if you're a police officer, you are 911. You are the person that is going to go over there and address the threat. You don't get to go to a position of safety. You get to go to where all the danger's at. Wherever the gunfire is coming from, that's where you're going. There's no calling the military. There's no calling the Navy SEALs. There's no calling Delta Force. You can't call Rangers. That's all in the movies. SWAT. Okay, having a SWAT team is rare at a lot of law enforcement agencies as a whole. Most law enforcement agencies only have a few officers, so SWAT teams are rare. You are SWAT. Barricaded suspect. You're going to call the local police department or sheriff's department as a police officer. Can you guys send over your SWAT? Unable to at this point in time. You are SWAT. You go there and you address the threat, no matter what the costs are. That's your responsibility as a police officer. We often complain about working overtime. Maybe we work the 12-hour shift or 16-hour shift. Well, if you have a major crime, you might work a 30-hour shift, a 36-hour shift straight. The longest that I have worked is probably about a 22 to 23-hour shift. And why is that? Because I couldn't go home until my report was turned in. And why did that become a 22 and a half hour shift? Because when you make a felony arrest, depending on where you're at, you have to finish that report by the end of your watch. So the supervisors don't care if you're pulling a 12-hour shift, a 16-hour shift, a 20-hour shift, that report will be turned in on time. Even if it involves you staying more than 24 hours. It sounds tough, guys, and it is. It really is. Just imagine you having to stay extra long to write that report. And when you turn in your report, when you turn it in, there's no guarantee that the watch commander is going to accept the report. Mr. Sean, can you come into our office? I know that you pulled already a 20-hour shift. I know you're tired. I know you want to go home, but hey, man, this report, nah, you got to make some corrections. And there are major corrections that need to be made. I also need you to do some follow-up work and get a hold of some of these witnesses here. And I need you to get me a statement that has a lot more detail than what you have. That's how a 12-hour shift or 8-hour shift becomes a 22 and a half or a 23-hour shift. You can't make this stuff up. Traumatic incidents. The rule does not stop because you handled a call for service where there's a traumatic encounter. The rule doesn't say, hey, you've been to a call for service that had a traumatic incident. We're going to give you a more calm incident on the next call for service. It absolutely does not work that way. I remember when I pulled a 2-year-old boy out of the water. He was dead. And I went back to the station after everything's said and done. Went in the parking lot. I put my head, rested it on the steering wheel. And seconds into my meditation, another call for service appeared. Structure house on fire. Or structure fire. Blaze code 3 to the scene. Do what I had to do. And that call for service earlier with that child who was gone and the mother was holding him in her arms right before she handed him to me. That was barely sinking in, and I could just start to feel it. Right after that, somebody called in sick. I pull a 16-hour shift. 16-hour shift. That day, I probably got about 2 to 3 hours of sleep. After a traumatic incident, you're supposed to get 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours. That's why I highly support our men and women in the military. They're in a combat zone. They're taking fire. They're returning fire. They've had IEDs blowing up near them. Maybe they lost their comrades. And they don't get to have an 8-hour pause. At all. So that's why I value our men and women in the military. Law enforcement, I'm not even going to say it's the same thing. There's more opportunity to get that 8 hours of sleep in between. But it's hard, guys, in law enforcement. Some time ago, this was like 7 years after that incident. I was near a pool and I could smell foam. And I was asking myself, why am I smelling foam? And it brought me back to that day when that foam was coming out of the boy's mouth and I was giving him CPR. This is years later, guys. These things just stick with you. Do you want to have this type of life? I only got 8 more years of this. I'm down 20. I got 8 more. And I think I'm going to last. That's all I have today. If you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, looking forward to dialogue. I know that there are some of you who have made a transition from law enforcement to private investigations and private security. I also want to hear from you guys as well. Take care, everybody.